The day I died was supposed to be the happiest of my life. The cathedral was dripping in roses, the aisle lined with diamonds on loan, the cameras flashing like it was a royal coronation. I'd just tightened my grip on my bouquet when I overheard it, my groom, whispering to his mistress in the sacristy, "Don't worry. She's just a stepping stone. I'll divorce her after the merger." My blood ran cold. My veil trembled with every furious breath. And like an idiot, I charged down the aisle anyway, ready to rip him apart in front of 500 guests. But the universe had other plans. A chandelier, older than the cathedral itself, groaned, cracked, and fell, straight onto me. The last thing I heard was the crowd screaming, "The bride is dead." Darkness swallowed me whole. Then, light. I woke in a silk bed, satin sheets tangled around me. My head pounded, my throat dry, my hand heavy with a ring. Slowly, I turned. And froze. The man lying beside me wasn't my groom. It was his brother. His older, sharper, colder brother. His lashes flickered, his eyes snapped open, and his voice was like ice cutting into my skin. "Good morning, wife." My first instinct was to scream. My second was to rip the sheets off and bolt, but my body wouldn't obey. My heart was hammering too loudly, my brain scrambling to catch up to the absurdity of what had just happened. I died. I knew I did. I remembered the chandelier, the way the screams pierced my ears, the weight of 100 shards of glass crashing down. I remembered darkness swallowing me whole. And yet here I was, blinking up at a ceiling painted with golden trim, lying in a bed I'd never seen before, with a man who most definitely wasn't the groom I'd left at the altar. No. This was worse. This was his brother. Alexander Hale. Colder, sharper, older, the man who'd spent my entire engagement regarding me like I was an unwelcome stain on the family's reputation. And now, as he sat up against the headboard, watching me with narrowed eyes, the word he'd spoken still rang in my head. "Wife. What did you just call me?" My voice cracked, torn between disbelief and hysteria. His brows arched lazily, as though my outrage amused him. "You heard me. Wife. My wife." I scrambled upright, clutching the sheets around me like they could protect me from the insanity of it all. "That's impossible," I snapped. "I was supposed to marry your brother." His mouth curved into the faintest smirk, one that sent chills down my spine. "And yet, here you are. Married to me." My pulse thundered. I glanced down at my left hand, at the ring gleaming there, heavier than any shackle. It wasn't the one my groom had slipped onto my finger at the rehearsal dinner. It was larger, older, the Hale family heirloom ring everyone whispered was cursed. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "This isn't real." Alexander leaned closer, his hand braced on the mattress, his voice dropping to a dangerous purr. "It's very real, Diana. You've been my wife for 6 months." My stomach lurched, bile rising in my throat. 6 months? The words came out strangled. "That's not possible. Yesterday I was at my wedding." My voice broke, panic spiraling. He tilted his head, studying me as though I were a puzzle piece forced into the wrong box. "So you finally decided to wake up," he said softly, almost to himself. His hand brushed my wrist before I could yank it back. His gaze flicked down to where my pulse was racing beneath his touch, and for the first time, his mask slipped just slightly. "Relax," he murmured. "You're not dead. Though maybe you should be." My heart seized, my throat tightening. "What does that mean?" His eyes met mine, cold and unyielding. "It means you don't remember." "Good. Let's keep it that way." He stood, his robe falling into place with aristocratic precision, and strode toward the door. Before he disappeared into the hallway, he glanced back once, his expression unreadable. "Get dressed. We have a brunch to attend." And Diana, his gaze darkened, locking with mine like a blade pressed to my skin. "Try not to embarrass me in front of our family this time." The door clicked shut, leaving me clutching the sheets, trembling with questions that had no answers. 6 months. Married to Alexander. Alive in a life that wasn't mine. And somewhere in this twisted reality, the man I'd once called my groom was waiting, without a clue who I really was. I spent the next hour staring at the closet full of gowns, each one expensive enough to pay off the debts of my entire hometown. They weren't mine, yet somehow they were. Silk and satin and sequins in every shade, all perfectly tailored to a body I barely recognized when I caught my reflection in the mirror. I had been dead less than a day ago, and now I was a hale wife of 6 months. The absurdity was almost comical, if it hadn't been so terrifying. I finally chose a pale blue dress with sleeves that fell off my shoulders like wisps of cloud, mostly because it looked least like something a ghost would wear. As I fastened the last button, the door opened without a knock. Alexander stood there, immaculate in a gray suit, his tie knotted so perfectly it could have strangled me. His eyes flicked over me with slow, infuriating scrutiny, lingering just long enough to make my skin burn. "At least you still remember how to dress," he said coolly. I clenched my jaw. "Do you always barge into your wife's room uninvited?" His mouth twitched like he wanted to smile but thought better of it. "Only when my wife forgets we're late." He offered his arm, like some kind of royal escort, but when I didn't take it, his brow arched. "Don't tell me you've suddenly decided you're shy. Don't tell me you've suddenly decided you're charming," I shot back, brushing past him. His low chuckle followed me down the hall, maddeningly warm for someone so infuriating. The brunch was worse than I'd feared. The Hale estate was crawling with relatives, investors, reporters, all gathered to coo over the empire's golden couple. Cameras flashed as Alexander guided me to the head table, his hand firm at my waist, his expression cool but controlled, the picture of devotion. "Smile," he murmured under his breath. "Our perfect marriage depends on it." I plastered on a grin sharp enough to cut glass, leaning closer as if sharing a secret. "If you squeeze my waist any harder, they'll get a headline about domestic abuse." He didn't even blink. "If I let go, you'd bolt." "I know you too well." I nearly choked on my mimosa. Too well? I'd barely survived seeing him naked in the same bed. Yet here he was, acting like we'd been sparring for years. Every Hale cousin and aunt cooed over us, marveling at how in love we looked, while I sat stiff in my chair, trapped in a masquerade I didn't understand. And then I saw him. My groom. My almost husband. He wasn't supposed to be here, but there he was, Daniel Hale, lounging at the far end of the table, alive and smirking and utterly unrecognizing. His gaze swept over me, slow and calculating, before he raised his glass in a mock toast. "You look radiant," he said loudly enough for the table to hear. My stomach dropped. Alexander's hand tightened on mine under the table, his knuckles pressing into my skin, a silent warning. "Careful, brother," he said, his tone as smooth as poison. "She's spoken for." Gasps rippled through the guests, whispers exploding in every corner, the press scribbling furiously. Daniel only smirked wider, his eyes never leaving mine. "Funny," he said, his voice dripping with amusement, "she looks like she doesn't even know who she belongs to." My breath caught, the chandelier of memory crashing down all over again. Because he was right. I didn't know. Not in this world. Not in this marriage. Not anymore. The room was buzzing with whispers, forks clattering against china as every pair of eyes turned toward us. Daniel leaned back in his chair, smug and dangerous, his words still echoing in my skull. "She looks like she doesn't even know who she belongs to." My pulse roared in my ears, my breath shallow, but Alexander didn't flinch. His hand stayed locked on mine under the table, a steel trap disguised as a tender gesture. He raised his glass in a slow, deliberate toast, his smile so controlled it could have been carved from marble. "Don't mistake silence for weakness, Daniel," he said evenly, his voice pitched just loud enough to slice through the murmurs. "My wife knows exactly where she belongs." Heat flooded my face, both from the weight of his words and the way his thumb pressed against my skin like he was staking a claim in front of the world. Daniel only smirked, his gaze flicking to me before he tipped his glass in mock surrender. Of course. My mistake. The conversation around the table staggered back to life, but the tension didn't ease. Cameras had caught every word, every look, every shift of power. Headlines were already being written in real time, and I was the headline, the bride who died, reborn as her groom's brother's wife. My hand trembled beneath Alexander's grip, but he never released me, even when the waiters cleared plates, even when reporters surged closer to snap photos of us together. By the time the brunch ended, I was exhausted, strung taut like a wire about to snap. I didn't breathe again until we were back in the limousine, the tinted windows shielding us from prying eyes. I yanked my hand from his, glaring at him with all the fury I'd swallowed in silence. What the hell was that? His gaze remained fixed on the skyline as the city blurred past. That, he said calmly, was me saving you from your own hesitation. I scoffed, heat rising in my chest. Saving me? You're insane. I don't even know what this is, what we are, and you're my wife, he cut in smoothly, finally turning to face me. His eyes were sharp, unwavering, burning with something I didn't dare name. That's what this is. That's all anyone needs to know. My laugh was bitter, humorless. You say it like it's a fact carved in stone, but you don't get it, I don't remember any of this. One moment I was at the altar with Daniel, the next I'm in your bed. How do you expect me to just play along? His jaw tightened, his knuckles white where they gripped the armrest. Because you don't have a choice. The words hung in the air like a guillotine, final and sharp. My heart pounded, anger warring with panic. No choice? Is that what you think marriage is? A cage you can lock me in because you're Alexander Hale and the empire bends to your will? His lips curled, not in a smile but in something darker. Don't pretend you don't feel it too. You think I didn't see the way you looked at me back there? The way you leaned into my hand when he taunted you? You might not remember the last 6 months, Diana, but your body does. My breath caught, my cheeks blazing, because the worst part was that he wasn't entirely wrong. Even now, trapped in the quiet of the car, I could still feel the ghost of his touch on my skin, the way his voice had vibrated in my bones when he called me his wife. I forced myself to look away, to glare out the window as the mansion gates loomed closer. I don't belong to anyone, I said, my voice a whisper but firm. Silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. And then, so softly I almost didn't hear it, Alexander murmured, "We'll see." The car slowed to a stop. I didn't wait for him to open the door, I pushed it myself, storming into the house before the driver could blink. But his footsteps followed, steady and unhurried, like a predator tracking prey that had nowhere left to run. That night, I locked my bedroom door. Or at least, I thought I did. Sometime after midnight, I woke to the sound of it clicking open, the creak of hinges slicing through the silence. My pulse spiked as Alexander stepped inside, his shadow cutting across the moonlight. "What are you doing?" My voice cracked, half fury, half fear. He stopped at the foot of the bed, his expression unreadable. "Making sure you're safe." "From what?" I snapped. His gaze held mine, steady and unflinching. "From yourself." "From him." "From everyone who would rather see you gone than by my side." The room was silent except for my ragged breathing. And in that silence, I realized with a chill that he wasn't joking. He meant it. I sat up in bed, my pulse still skittering like a trapped bird, watching Alexander's silhouette in the moonlight. He wasn't moving closer, but he didn't leave either. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, his presence filling the room until I couldn't breathe. "You can't just walk into my room in the middle of the night and say things like that," I hissed, clutching the sheets tighter around me. His head tilted, his eyes gleaming in the dark. "Why not? You're my wife. This house is ours. Or did you forget that too?" Heat prickled down my spine, both from anger and the infuriating calm in his tone. "Don't use my memory against me," I snapped. "I don't know what kind of marriage we supposedly had, but if you think I'll let you control me like this," he moved then, not rushing, just crossing the room in slow, deliberate steps that made the air thicken with every stride. He stopped beside the bed, looking down at me with that infuriating composure, like he was always 10 moves ahead. "Control you?" His voice dropped lower, softer, more dangerous. "Diana, if I wanted control, you wouldn't still be arguing with me." My breath caught, fury tangled with something hotter, something I didn't want to name. "Then what do you want?" For the first time, his mask slipped. His eyes darkened, his jaw tightening as though the words were tearing at him from the inside. "To keep you alive this time." The silence that followed crashed over me like a wave. My throat went dry. "What do you mean, this time?" His lips pressed into a thin line, his hand flexing at his side. "Nothing," he said finally, his voice clipped. "Forget it." He turned to leave, but I grabbed his wrist before I could think better of it. His skin was warm under my palm, his pulse thrumming as wildly as mine. "No," I said firmly. "No more cryptic half-answers. You know something. About me, about what happened. Tell me." His gaze flicked down to where I held him, and for a second, his composure cracked again, his voice rough when he spoke. "If I told you everything, you'd never look at me the same way." My stomach flipped, my chest tightening. "Try me." His jaw clenched, his free hand lifting like he wanted to touch my face, then dropping before it reached me. He pulled his wrist gently from my grip, his eyes searching mine for something I couldn't decipher. "Not yet," he said finally, his voice a low growl. "But soon." He left then, the door clicking softly behind him, and I was left trembling in the dark, clutching the sheets like they could anchor me to sanity. The next morning, the whispers started again. A headline flashing across every society page, Hale brothers' rivalry renewed, but over her? Photographs from brunch showed Daniel raising his glass toward me, Alexander's hand crushing mine, the tension between them palpable even through a camera lens. The world was eating it up, spinning me into a story I had no script for. But worse than the tabloids was the truth simmering beneath it. Alexander knew something about my death. Daniel was still circling like a shark. And me? I was caught between two brothers in a marriage I couldn't remember, with feelings I couldn't control. By the time afternoon rolled around, the entire city seemed to have an opinion about my so-called love triangle. My phone buzzed relentlessly with headlines and gossip notifications, photos of me sandwiched between the two Hale brothers at brunch, with captions screaming about forbidden chemistry and family betrayal. I tossed it onto the couch with a groan, only to find Alexander leaning in the doorway, sleeves rolled up, tie discarded, looking infuriatingly composed. "You should stop reading those," he said smoothly. "They'll only poison your head." I shot him a glare. "Maybe I like knowing what kind of circus you've dragged me into." He crossed the room in slow, measured strides, plucking up the phone and setting it face down on the table. "It isn't a circus if we control the show." His voice was calm, but I caught the steel beneath it, the edge of someone used to manipulating entire empires. "So what? You expect me to smile, wave, and play the perfect wife while your brother keeps circling like a vulture?" My voice rose despite myself. "You expect me to pretend this is normal?" He stopped just inches from me, his height forcing me to tilt my chin up. His eyes burned into mine, unflinching. "I don't expect you to pretend, Diana. I expect you to trust me." My laugh was bitter, sharp. "Trust? From the man who just admitted he's hiding something from me?" His jaw flexed, his control finally cracking. "You want the truth? Fine. Daniel doesn't just want you. He tried to take you before." My chest tightened. "Before?" His lips curved into something humorless. "Before you died. Before fate or whatever madness this is decided to drop you back in my bed. He's been circling you from the start, and if I hadn't stepped in, you'd already be his trophy." My pulse roared, my mind spinning with the weight of his words. "So what? You married me out of convenience? To save face? To keep Daniel from winning?" His gaze dropped briefly to my mouth before locking back onto my eyes, his voice low, rough. I married you because the thought of him touching you made me want to burn the world down. The silence after that was unbearable. My lips parted, my body betraying me as heat coiled low in my stomach, but I forced myself to speak. You can't just say things like that. He stepped closer, close enough that his chest brushed mine with every breath. Do you think I care about what I can or can't say anymore? His hand lifted, hovering by my jaw, trembling with restraint. You're mine, Diana. And if you can't see that yet, I'll spend every day proving it until you do. My knees weakened, my heart hammering, but before I could answer, a sharp knock on the door sliced the moment apart. A servant stepped in, bowing quickly. Sir, there's a visitor. Alexander's eyes narrowed. Who? The servant hesitated. It's your brother. My stomach dropped as Daniel's voice echoed down the hall, smooth and mocking. Don't tell me I'm interrupting, brother. I just came to see my favorite sister-in-law. Alexander's hand finally fell from my jaw, his entire body snapping back into cold, lethal composure. Stay here, he ordered me, his tone brooking no argument, before striding out of the room like a storm about to break. And I was left trembling, torn between terror and anticipation, because one thing was certain, this wasn't over. It was only the beginning. The voices carried down the hall, sharp and unmistakable. Alexander's clipped, lethal calm against Daniel's smooth, mocking tone. I crept closer, my bare feet silent on the marble, my pulse racing as their words cut through the air like knives. You shouldn't be here, Alexander said, voice low but edged with steel. You lost your right to stand in this house a long time ago. Daniel laughed, the sound cold, theatrical. Lost my right? You mean you stole what was mine? Admit it, brother, you've always wanted what I had. And now, you've gone and married it. My stomach twisted, heat flooding my cheeks. I pressed myself against the wall, every nerve on fire. Alexander's response was quiet, dangerous. She was never yours. Not then, not now, not ever. Silence followed, the kind that could crack stone. Then Daniel's voice, lower, sharper. You think she knows the truth? That her fairy tale husband isn't the savior he pretends to be? My breath caught, but before I could lean closer, Alexander's tone dropped into a growl. Say one more word, and I'll throw you out of this house myself. Daniel chuckled again, but the sound retreated, footsteps echoing toward the front doors. A moment later, the slam of wood reverberated through the hall, leaving nothing but silence. I slipped back toward my room, but Alexander's voice cut through the quiet. How much did you hear? I froze. He was behind me, close enough that the warmth of his breath brushed the back of my neck. Slowly, I turned, meeting his eyes. They were darker than I'd ever seen, the storm inside them barely restrained. Enough, I whispered. Enough to know you're both hiding something from me. His jaw tightened, his fists flexing at his sides. It isn't your burden to carry. My fury surged, cutting through my fear. Isn't it? I died, Alexander. I woke up in a life that isn't mine, in a marriage I don't remember. Don't you dare tell me this isn't my burden. He stared at me for a long moment, his chest rising and falling with ragged breaths, before he stepped closer, caging me against the wall with his arms. My pulse thundered as his face hovered just inches from mine, his voice a growl. Do you have any idea what you do to me? You drive me insane, Diana. You tear down every wall I built, and I don't know if I want to strangle you or kiss you. My breath hitched, my lips parting in shock, in something dangerously close to surrender. But before I could move, before I could answer, he tore himself away, running a hand through his hair like a man on the brink. Stay away from him, he ordered, his voice rough, raw. No matter what he says. Promise me. I swallowed hard, my voice trembling. Why? What's the truth you're so afraid of me finding out? His back was to me now, his shoulders taut, his silence louder than any confession. And I realized with a chill that whatever secret the Hale brothers were hiding, it wasn't just about the past. It was about me. Alexander avoided me the entire next day. No breakfast together, no cutting remarks in the hallway, not even the flicker of his shadow outside my door. It should have been a relief, but instead it gnawed at me, left me restless and pacing like a caged animal. When I finally ventured out into the gardens to clear my head, I wasn't surprised to find Daniel waiting. He leaned casually against the marble fountain, sunlight catching on his smug smile like it had been choreographed. "You look pale, Diana. Marriage to my brother not treating you well?" I stiffened, already turning to leave, but he caught my hand, pulling me back just hard enough to leave a mark. "Don't," I snapped, yanking free. His eyes glittered with something darker. "You deserve to know the truth," he said smoothly. "Alexander isn't your savior. He didn't marry you to protect you, he married you to own you. He's been lying since the beginning." My pulse thundered. "And you haven't?" "I heard you at our wedding, Daniel. I died before I could even say the vows because of you." His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but he recovered quickly, leaning closer. "I only said what he wanted me to. You think you overheard some grand betrayal, but it was staged. He wanted you to hear it. He wanted to break you, so he could sweep in and play the hero. Why do you think you woke up in his bed instead of mine?" My stomach lurched, bile rising. His words crawled under my skin like poison, but before I could demand answers, a shadow fell over us. Alexander stood at the edge of the garden, his eyes locked on Daniel, his face carved from fury. In 3 strides he was there, his hand fisted in his brother's collar, dragging him back from me with a force that rattled the fountain. "Touch her again," Alexander hissed, his voice low, lethal, "and I will end you." Daniel only laughed, even as his feet scraped against the stones. There it is. The real Alexander. Obsessed. Possessive. Terrified she'll learn the truth. Alexander's grip tightened before he shoved him back with enough force to send him stumbling. "Get out," he growled. Daniel adjusted his jacket, smirk intact, and leaned close enough that his whisper brushed my ear. "Ask him about the chandelier. Ask him why it really fell." And then he was gone, his footsteps fading into the distance, leaving me trembling. I turned to Alexander, my chest heaving, my voice sharp. "What does he mean? What does he know about my death?" For the first time Alexander didn't meet my eyes. His fists were clenched, his jaw locked, his silence deafening. And in that silence, dread coiled in my gut like a living thing. The silence stretched until I couldn't take it anymore. "Tell me," I demanded, my voice shaking with fury and fear. "Tell me what Daniel meant." Alexander's jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on the horizon as though looking at me would unravel him completely. "It doesn't matter," he said finally, but his voice was rough, stripped of its usual composure. "The hell it doesn't," I snapped, stepping closer. "I died, Alexander. A chandelier crushed me on my wedding day, and now I wake up in your bed like none of it ever happened. Don't you dare tell me it doesn't matter." His eyes flicked to mine then, dark and stormy, the control he wore like armor fraying at the edges. "If I tell you," he murmured, "you'll never forgive me." My heart slammed against my ribs. "You think I can forgive you for lying to me every single day? Try me." His breath came heavier, his chest rising and falling as though he was fighting himself. Finally, he stepped forward, his hands bracing against my arms, not rough but steady, holding me in place like I might vanish. His voice dropped to a growl, raw and unfiltered. "The chandelier didn't fall by accident." My stomach lurched, bile creeping up my throat. "What are you saying?" "Daniel arranged it," he bit out. "He wanted you gone. He wanted to ruin the merger, break the family, tear down everything." I knew it, Diana. I knew, and I didn't stop it in time. The world tilted. My knees wobbled, and I swayed against his grip. "You knew?" The words came out a whisper, full of betrayal. "You let me die?" His eyes burned, anguish searing through the fury. "I tried to stop it." I swear I tried. But I was too late. And when fate gave me this, his hand tightened on mine, his voice breaking. When it gave me you back, I wasn't about to let go again. So I married you. I claimed you. And I'll burn the world before I let him take you from me. My chest heaved, torn between horror and something hotter, something frighteningly close to relief. His confession was madness, obsession, desperation all tangled into one. But the truth of it was undeniable. He had chosen me, not for empire, not for image, but because he couldn't let go. My voice cracked when I whispered, "You should have told me." His forehead pressed against mine, his breath ragged. I couldn't. I was afraid you'd run. Afraid you'd hate me more than you already did. My hands trembled against his chest, torn between shoving him away and pulling him closer. But when his lips hovered just above mine, trembling with restraint, the decision was made for me. I surged forward, crashing into him, our mouths colliding in a kiss that burned away every wall, every lie, every denial we had clung to. It was fierce, furious, desperate, like he was trying to memorize me, like I was trying to prove I was alive. When we finally broke apart, gasping, his voice was raw against my ear. "You're mine, Diana. In this life, in any life. I won't let you go again." And for the first time I didn't fight him. I kissed him back. The kiss didn't end so much as it transformed. What began as fire and fury melted into something slower, deeper, an unspoken promise pressed into every brush of his lips. His hands cradled my face like I was both fragile and untouchable, and I realized with a shock that Alexander Hale, the man who had made empires kneel, was trembling. When he finally pulled back, our foreheads still touching, his voice was raw, stripped of all the sharp edges he used to keep the world at bay. "I've admired you since before that damn wedding," he confessed. "Long before you knew me as anything more than Daniel's brother. I saw the way you carried yourself, the way you never bowed to anyone, not even him. And I hated him for having what I wanted." My breath caught, my chest tight. "Then why didn't you say something? Why let me walk into that cathedral?" His jaw tightened, guilt flickering across his features. "Because I thought I could live without you. That wanting you was weakness. I told myself Daniel would ruin you, and when he did, I would still be standing while you hated him. But then the chandelier fell, and I realized I'd rather burn with you than stand alone without you." My heart twisted painfully at his words, half rage, half something dangerously close to love. I shoved lightly at his chest, blinking back tears. "You're infuriating. You're arrogant, impossible, and half the time I want to strangle you." He caught my hand, pressing it to his chest where his heart hammered as wildly as mine. "But you don't want to leave." The worst part was, he was right. My silence was answer enough, and his lips curved into the faintest, most devastating smile I'd ever seen on him. He kissed my knuckles, lingering, before pulling me flush against him once more. The next days blurred into something I could only describe as surreal. For the first time, we didn't avoid each other in the mornings. He sat across from me at breakfast, coffee already poured the way I liked it. He didn't bark orders during appearances. Instead, he brushed his hand against mine in public, so subtly that it sent the tabloids into a frenzy. At night, instead of locking myself away, I found myself drawn into the study where he worked late. Sometimes we argued, sometimes we sat in silence, but either way, the distance between us shrank with every passing hour. And yet, Daniel's words clung to me like smoke. "Ask him about the chandelier. Ask him why it really fell." I did, and Alexander gave me his truth. But what if Daniel had more? What if fate wasn't done twisting the knife? The thought haunted me, even as Alexander made it harder and harder to doubt him. One evening, after a gala where he'd openly ignored half a dozen investors just to keep me at his side, I cornered him in our bedroom. "If I believe you," I said, standing with my back against the door, blocking his exit, "then this isn't a game anymore. No pretending. No empire politics. Just us." His eyes softened in a way that made my knees weak. He stepped closer, lifting my chin with the gentlest touch. It was never a game to me. Not where you're concerned. My throat tightened, my voice barely audible. Then say it. Not in front of cameras, not to hurt Daniel, not as some grand performance. Say it to me. His gaze locked on mine, unflinching, his voice steady. I love you, Diana. I've loved you longer than I care to admit. And I will spend every day proving it until you finally believe me. The words hit me like thunder, shattering what was left of my defenses. I kissed him, slow and aching, tears slipping down my cheeks as his arms wrapped around me like he'd never let go. For the first time since I died, I felt alive. Not because I was breathing. Not because fate had thrown me into another twisted timeline. But because against all odds, against every secret and every betrayal, I had found something real in the most impossible place, married to the brother I was never supposed to have. And maybe, just maybe, this time death wouldn't get in the way.